We got some tax nerds up here. We're gonna have a good conversation. I'm actually gonna let them briefly introduce themselves. Obviously, you've got, I think in the program's an extended bio, but maybe just real quickly introductions and we can get right into it.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kathryn Chakmak Reed. I am the tax policy advisor for Chairman Jason Smith. I handle all of the development credits for him, which I know you all care so much about, but most of his domestic policy portfolio as well. And I've been with him for over 6 years now, so it's my breadth of experience.
Beverly?
Hi everyone, my name is Beverly Weshnak. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee for the Democrats, Tax Counsel. My portfolio is a lot because we're in the minority, so it's like I get everything in the kitchen sink, and that includes housing, but I really enjoy having that portfolio.
I'm Jamie Cummins. I work for Senator Crapo, ranking member of the Finance Committee. I've been on the Finance Committee staff since 2020, and I work on a number of issues, kind of depends on what's happening, frankly, but housing is one of the issues that I work on, and other development credits and whatnot, and it's great to be here.
Hi, I'm Kim Arndt. I'm on Senate Finance Committee. I work for Chairman Wyden. We're in the majority for now. I've worked there for a year. It's been great. And my portfolio includes housing. I also do all small businesses, pass-throughs. I've been helping out with nominations as well.
So great bipartisan, bicameral panel here. Maybe before we kind of dive into some of the housing issues, as you've heard, these guys cover a lot of issues. Maybe if you can just talk about kind of the big picture priorities for each of your bosses coming into 2025.
Yeah, so Chairman Smith has been very vocal since he first became chairman 2 years ago, that his primary driving force is how we can deliver for hardworking Americans and small businesses. People that are trying to make ends meet, that are, at the heart of, everything that we do and see. And so that I feel like you see is echoed through the work that he's done in the past year, 2 years, I guess. Mm-hmm. The tax teams were a huge part of that. His field hearing, schedule was a huge part of that as well, going out into the country and hearing directly from people versus hearing from, folks in DC. And that has been what crafted our partisan tax package in June of 2023. And then it also is what crafted the Smith-Wyden package.
Beverly?
Great. I just want to have a small disclaimer that anything I say is my viewpoint and not of Mr. Neal's. But for the 2025 priorities, some of those include, and this is just a list that comes to mind, but it is not, everything. Increasing the child tax credit and really anything that's going to be benefiting the low-income taxpayers, having wealthy taxpayers pay their fair share, and anything that's going to be helping promote like the local communities, like LIHTC.
Yeah, so I think looking into next year, this is not going to be a breaking news moment here. That Ranking Member Crapo's top priority is extending the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and it's important to keep in mind there's a huge cost of inaction. There's a $4.6 trillion tax hike on the horizon if Congress doesn't act. So simply stated, and I know we're going to get into the sort of the nuance and substance of this today, but his top priority is preventing that massive tax increase. I think over $2 trillion of which fall on folks that make less than $400,000 a year. So that's his top priority. And I will also say that I am speaking for myself and not for Ranking Member Crapo.
Ditto on that last sentence. Our priorities are a little different.
Don't tweet anything that we're saying, and we'll be good.
Yeah, this is all off the record.
We don't want to end up in the papers.
Yes, do not do that.
Kathryn, we worked on the Wyden-Smith tax deal, which had huge expansion to LIHTC. Housing is a huge priority for Chairman Wyden. It's so important. We understand like there is a housing crisis, an affordability crisis in the country, and so when we were preparing before the election for 2025, housing was always a top priority. If the election had gone another way, we wanted to go big on housing, and we still plan on, thinking about reintroducing things like the DASH Act and really supporting expansions to LIHTC and basis boosts and middle-income housing tax credits and all of those things that would really help the lower-income folks and middle-income folks in America.
Yeah, so since you mentioned LIHTC and the Smith-Wyden bill, which passed the House, is there anything maybe we should glean from that going into 2025? Obviously, with a new change in control in the Senate, change in control in the White House, do we expect maybe some provisions of that bill to reappear? I don't know, Kathryn, Jamie, any others commentary there?
Yeah, so obviously Smith-Wyden was negotiated in a bipartisan fashion, which the chairman is very proud of. Now that looking at 2025, we are in a trifecta, so it is a little bit different of an environment. Perhaps we aren't making we're making different negotiations than we did previously. And with that, I think, LIHTC, among other provisions of Smith-Wyden, and then also looking at the June economic package, I think are good places to look when it comes to what the House's priorities are going to be looking forward. The child tax credit is a big part of that. Like Jamie said, ensuring that we don't have Americans facing a $4.6 trillion tax increase is the goal at the end of the day. And I will add, I've been saying this everywhere I go, Jamie and Kim have both heard it, I think, a number of times now. Something just for perspective. The $4.6 trillion does not include the provisions that were in Smith-Wyden. It doesn't include LIHTC, it doesn't include new markets, historics, well, part of historics, but that's a separate thing. Anything like that. So that's an additional cost for you all to think about as we are having to think through all of that as well.
Does anyone else want to comment on the Smith-Wyden process, or good there? And maybe, I guess, again, maybe now shifting to 2025, tax Superbowl, as this panel is talked about. You guys are obviously all pros. But quick corporate tax rate question. This has been getting a lot of attention, whether the corporate tax rate will be lowered. President Trump obviously talked about this on the campaign trail. Obviously, it matters for this crowd for just the value of LIHTC credits. So I don't know if you all have any commentary on if you think the corporate rate will actually be lowered, if you think it'll stay the same. I know your bosses have spoken on this a little bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to start on this one.
We want to rate it.
I just feel like I've been talking a lot, so go for it, Jamie.
Okay, I'll start on this one. Yeah, I think we might be in different spots on this one. Yeah, so I will just sort of, I'll reiterate what Ranking Member Crapo has said. He's spoken about this a number of times, saying that he thinks sort of keeping the corporate rate where it is the way to go forward. If we were talking about changing the corporate rate, it would be, I think, a discussion about lowering it, certainly not increasing it. And I think it's important to note that cutting the corporate rate in 2017, it was one of the kind of, if not the centerpiece of the bill, and created a ton of economic growth. And so, I don't think that my boss and a lot of finance Republicans are interested in increasing the corporate tax rate. I know there's some back and forth of members, on both sides of the Capitol about what the appropriate rate should be. And Kathryn, you should jump in also if you have something to add on this, and also Kim and Beverly as well. But I view that as more the discussion or the back and forth as just part of this process. I think you can expect some back and forth on what the appropriate, value of a deduction or credit may be on sort of a number of things. I think these are going to be the things that are talked about in the coming weeks and months. And so, at least for Senator Crapo, supports keeping it where it is or potentially lowering it if that is part of the discussion. But I think it's also too early to tell
Yeah, I'll add that to Senator Crapo's sentiment, the chairman shares it. He has said multiple times that he is not looking to raise the corporate rate. Keeping it at 21% would be fantastic. He also acknowledges that, we have a 2-vote majority right now, maybe. I don't know where the latest numbers are based on retirements and everything. Looking down, further into 2025, we're potentially looking at a 217, 215 scenario when hopefully we are doing a tax package. So we have no votes to lose. With that in mind, we have Republican members that do want to raise the corporate rate. They do have concerns there. And so to the extent that that's a priority to you guys, you need to be in there. It's not necessarily a Democrat-Republican problem or issue, rather. There are absolutely Republicans that are concerned that the corporate rate is too low and that corporations have too much of a cut.
Maybe we'll get into the mechanics of reconciliation a little later. I know some people in the audience are familiar, maybe some are less so. But let's stick with a few more the tax credit specifics. So we've talked a little bit about LIHTC, broad bipartisan support. Another bill with broad bipartisan support is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. Strong support. In fact, just this week it was announced there's over 100 co-sponsors in the House, a number of co-sponsors across the political spectrum in the Senate. Obviously, that deals with the single-family affordability and supply side. Can you all comment on kind of maybe the need for that type of legislation or your boss's perspective on such? Kim, I know your boss has been vocal on it.
We love neighborhood homes. Again, when we were thinking about when we think about housing policy, there are things that are meant to help people get into homes, like down payment assistance. But one of the big problems with affordability is supply. So as we were thinking through, there's so many housing proposals out there, and how do you prioritize them and how do you think about them? The way we the best way for us to think about it was, what is the supply number and how much does it cost? And it's almost like a cost per unit, right? And that's how you can, you really can think about getting more supply out there and increasing it so people can get into homes. And Neighborhood Homes does that. It's a great bill. And hopefully some parts of it get picked up next year.
Any other commentary on that?
I think for the committee, you saw in Smith-Wyden, our focus has been on LIHTC. Like Kim said, there's a lot of proposals out there, and they all cost money. So to that extent, everything's on the table, but we'll just have to see how everything plays out.
Maybe a couple other tax credits that I know the audience cares about: new markets, opportunity zones. We know opportunity zones, obviously, a lot of attention. It was part of the 2017 TCGA. A lot of proponents currently with the new HUD Secretary nominee, Tim Scott, President Trump. So any commentary on opportunity zones, what we should expect, any changes there, and then also new markets?
Want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I'll talk about new markets first and then talk about our opportunity zones. Look, in the Senate, there's a wide bipartisan support for the new markets tax credit. I suspect it's going to be one of the things that's discussed next year. Senator Daines, who has the new markets permanency bill in the Senate, is a member of the Senate Finance Committee, and I believe there's a number of other finance Republicans who are on the bill as well. Look, I think this is one of the things that Senator Crapo knows is one of the tools in the toolbox, and I think is broadly supportive of the credit. And I suspect this can be something that we're talking about a lot next year. On opportunity zones, again, Senator Scott, obviously a huge proponent of opportunity zones. As a member of the Finance Committee, Senator Crapo is a big supporter, and we have a lot of member interest as well. This is also something that I suspect will be in the mix next year. I've made the point before, and I'll just flag this again, that when we're talking about an extension or making something permanent, we can get into all of this in reconciliation discussion in a minute. But extending opportunity zones is is a different exercise than extending the new markets tax credit. It's two different things, credit versus the sort of 3 tax benefits that go with opportunity zones. So it's a bit of a different exercise. But what I do know and what we're hearing from members is, when they're home in their states and districts, they see projects. They like to go visit these things. They hear a lot about investment that the Opportunity Zones program has driven into distressed areas, and they view that as being a great thing. They want to see the benefits from those programs continue to flow. So we shall see what that actually means in terms of what the next step is, what Opportunity Zones 2.0 or what an extension actually looks like. Devil's in the details, but absolutely supportive and suspected is going to be kind of top of mind next year.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. Again, speaking to the work that the chairman has done in the partisan economic package in June 2023, there was a rural opportunity zones provision in it. So I think that shows his interest in continuing to do something on opportunity zones. Congressman Kelly, who is also the chair of the tax subcommittee, is the leader when it comes to opportunity zones, and he has been very vocal about it. He was also the chair of our community development tax team, which had a huge focus on those zones as well as new markets and LIHTC and historics. On new markets, Congresswoman Tenney is the leader there, another member of the Ways and Means Committee, and also a member of the community development tax team. So, and that has been a long-time priority of the chairman's as well. He's been a strong supporter of the new markets. He had the Rural Jobs Act, which created a rural version, you may be sensing a theme here, of the new markets program. So those kinds of things are definitely something of interest to the committee.
And I would just like to echo some of what you've heard here today. Mr. Neal is a big proponent. I'm sure probably a lot of people know that in this room already, of the new markets tax credit. I think he has about 27 of the new market projects in his district alone, and I believe he would like it to be permanent, the credit. As for opportunity zones, I think some of the Democrats were a little skeptical with TCGA when it first came out, but as Jamie has said, when they go back to their districts and they're seeing the benefits that some of the opportunity zones have created. So I think that members have softened on that, but where we go with opportunity zones is, who knows?
Well, maybe just
Can I make one point on that also?
Yeah, of course.
And sorry, Kim, if you have anything to add, I didn't want to cut you off. But just, to Beverly's last point, I think the way members are thinking about this in the Senate on the Finance Committee is that there's always room for improvement. There needs to be more transparency around, seeing there's not one of the big things in Opportunity Zones program is that there is no reporting, and we don't have a ton of data, and it's kind of difficult to get your arms around, where all the projects are and whatnot. And so those are the things that members are interested in. They're not saying it has to be exactly kind of copy and paste from the 2017 version. They're open at kind of making improvements and making the program work better.
So maybe just talking about reconciliation again, for education purposes, obviously the 2017 TCGA was passed using reconciliation, Affordable Care Act, Inflation Reduction Act. So it's been used by both parties over the years. Maybe if we can just kind of educate on what the process looks like. Obviously, a number of you have gone through the bird bath process before. What can be kind of included, and then maybe also, and I'm throwing a lot at you right now, but timing. I know there's been a lot of conversations in the press. Some people saying that this is going to be, you do a one reconciliation the first couple weeks, then another one. I think I'm personally skeptical of that. I know even Chairman Smith has noted that we've actually never done 2 reconciliation bills in the same year. So I think there's definitely challenges of timing, but maybe just kind of for the audience, a little process, and then how long you think is the expected timeline for something like that for a big tax bill.
To the point on timing, since you made that comment, and I'll defer to my Senate colleagues on the bird bath, because we don't play by those rules except when we have to send something their way.
Well, you do. By extension,
yes.
You have to, but yes, I'm happy to talk about it.
When it comes to timing, as the chairman has been pretty public about, is whether there's one or two reconciliation packages, tax needs to be in the first one. If we could do one big one, that would be probably the preferred option here. The reality is our majority, like I noted, is so small, smaller than the Senate's majority. And so we have no votes to lose. And when you give away the goodies in the first reconciliation bill, it makes it harder to get movement on the second one. And to the comment that there hasn't been two successful ones, the last time was 1997 under Speaker Gingrich, that there were two successful reconciliation packages in the same year. It's been 25 years, more than that now, since we've had two successful reconciliation packages. So it just expends a lot of energy. Reconciliation is a tough fight.
Yeah, and I think to Kathryn's point, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think you'll agree with this. It's sort of the point I was making at the beginning, that there is a huge cost of inaction. That's what I sort of pick up from Chairman Smith is like, Congress has to act, or else, it's a very bad result. On timing, there's a lot of discussion. I think Senator Crapo said publicly, whenever the time comes, whenever that may be, we'll be ready. And so I don't know that I have a ton to add on timing, just because I feel like there's so much discussion
nowadays. It changes hourly, I feel like, these days.
Do what?
It changes hourly these days.
I know, I know I'm hesitant, because as we're sitting here, who
Check
knows
your
what will have
phone.
happened.
Yes.
Yeah, look at Twitter. You all can look at Twitter and probably know more about what's happening than we do, because I'm serious. Yeah, this is it's a bizarre town. Okay, so on process, on reconciliation process, we will. Catherine has heard me say this in the last 24 hours, where we
do a lot of these things.
Yeah, we were talking to a different group yesterday, and I said, okay, I don't want to bring us down a rabbit hole. I don't want to put everyone to sleep talking about Senate reconciliation process. And then I proceeded to talk about it. And then we got questions, we got into all of this. So at this point, I guess we'll just go for it, just because the process here really does matter. I mean, that's a huge piece of this. The substance matters, the cost, all of that. The process really does matter. So in the Senate, we have what's known as the Byrd Rule. I wish we did not have the Byrd Rule, because it would make things a lot less complicated. But it is it's a rule that says there's a lot to it. I'll try and hit some of it without putting all of you to sleep, before all of you run to the back to go get coffee. So basically, it says anything in a budget reconciliation bill has to be budgetary in nature. It has to have some effect on the federal fisc. So if a provision has no budget impact, if it doesn't cost anything, it cannot be included in a reconciliation bill. So an example that Kathryn reminded me of yesterday is that in 2017, the title of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was challenged by the then majority and was taken out. The Senate parliamentarian ruled that the title, the words, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, does not have a budget effect. A title of a bill does not have a budget effect. So it was stripped out. So the official name of it is Public Law 115-97. So this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. So then the other sort of analysis you go through is to say whether a provision, if it does have a budget impact, is it more policy or is it more budget? What's really driving the bus with respect to any provision? And it's a provision by provision analysis, and the Senate parliamentarian makes this determination. And let me tell you, it is a bizarre process to go through. You literally go into a room in the Capitol, and you have the majority staff, the proponents of the bill, you have the leadership staff, you have the budget committee staff, finance committee staff, or whatever committee is involved. And then you have the minority counterparts, and you're in a room on two sides of a table, and the parliamentarian and her staff sit in the middle, like the judge, if you will, and you make arguments. You go back and forth. You argue these points. There can be other violations of the Byrd Rule, but those, are the big ones. Basically saying, is it more policy or is it more budget? And so, you give your best arguments. Ultimately, you turn it over to the Senate parliamentarian, and then you wait for her to make a decision. And then you eventually get a decision about, whether she views it as being more policy, in which case it will be taken out. So, one of the things that I always go to demonstrate this point is last time, and Kim and Beverly, you should jump in if you have a different take on this or a different example, but the most recent example, I think, a way to think about this was in the Inflation Reduction Act. There was a provision that would have increased the federal minimum wage. Clearly has an impact on the federal fisc, clearly has a budget impact. But our side made the argument, and they went back and forth. This was not the Finance Committee, this was the Help Committee, not us, made the argument that it was really more about effectuating a policy outcome, i.e. increasing the minimum wage, than it was really about spending. That the motivation of that was to increase the federal minimum wage, not to affect the budget. And that argument was successful. And so these are the sorts of things that we go back and forth on. Ultimately, once you go through this process, this Byrd-Bath process, you challenge provisions, you write memos. It's a very strange thing, and a very opaque process as well. It's not a public thing. There's no hearings on it or anything like that. You get the decisions from the parliamentarian, and then you move forward. Although the precedent certainly matters, so each time we go through this, we have the benefit of the decisions from the last reconciliation bill that will be instructive to the parliamentarian. So results that we had from arguments in the Inflation Reduction Act, American Rescue Plan, from TCJA, and so on and so forth, those are now binding on us. So said differently, Republicans now can't, not that let me be careful here in what I'm saying. Actually, I shouldn't even say what I'm about to say next, but you couldn't now, either side could not come in and try and make a change to the federal minimum wage because that's already been decided. So I could go on and on about this, but I'm going to stop myself there and see if anyone else has anything to add on.
Well, one other comment, because not that it's pertaining to low-income housing, but it does pertain to a lot of the conversations right now in the tax space for reconciliation, is that Social Security can't be touched.
Yeah.
The trust fund can't be impacted. Social Security can't be touched. And so when you hear President Trump talk about no tax on Social Security, that's something that, folks are going to have to think creatively about because there is that added, layer of the process.
Yeah, and the reason that's so important, the Social Security certainly, is because if it does touch Social Security, the bill is, that's a fatal flaw to the bill, and the bill loses its privilege status. And this is a lot of Washington speak, but basically then you can't pass it with a simple majority, and it is only, you can only pass it with 60-vote threshold. So you work all of this out ahead of time, so when you go to the floor, you don't run into that issue. That would be literally worst case scenario is the parliamentarian decides when you're on the floor that there's a fatal flaw in the bill, and you got to have 60 votes. So you avoid that by going through the process on the front end.
Kim, any IRA war stories or anything that?
I just started a year ago.
Right.
Actually, a year ago in like a month and a half, so like 13 and a half months, because I'm like still in months old, like a baby. No, so I actually am kind of fascinated and really excited to, well, sad, but it's still excited to be a part of the process and see how it works. Crying a little.
Kim and I are going to be in a room arguing with each other, perhaps.
It's going to be so hard.
No, I know. I mean, hopefully we won't.
I'll be like, it touches Social Security.
Kim, if it makes you feel any better, having been on the budget committee through ARPA and BVB, it's still some fun on the other side too.
Oh, good. Yeah.
It's just a different fun.
It's different.
We'll make you guys take hard votes.
And it's an interesting process and a very unique process. So if we do wind up in the room with a parliamentarian together,
I really hope so.
It's interesting.
I got to be in the room where it happens.
That's right. That's right. So if it does happen, there is, and look, I should also make a point here that, we've been through, we went through 2 bills last Congress, last Congress. And, we say, oh, we're in this room and we're sort of like this arguing with each other. But, I have to underscore that, like, none of this is personal. Like, we all get along very well. And even if we are,
it's like being on debate team.
Exactly. Exactly. It is.
Go have a beer after.
Yeah. I mean, and for American Rescue Plan, we're doing arguments and it's like, I'm arguing with people that I'm very, very close friends with. Everyone's doing their jobs. And so, of course, it's everyone walks out of there and.
Right, and we're not elected officials, right?
Exactly.
The policies, we have our own views that we're talking about, but we're here to push forth the policy that the American people elected.
That's right.
I think that makes it easier to kind of separate yourself.
Yeah, our names are not on the door.
No.
Which would be a scary thought.
Maybe one day.
Maybe. Oh,
no thanks.
Maybe just talking about, again, sticking with reconciliation, and we've talked about the size and scope of the bill, which hopefully will include lots of great housing priorities. But can you maybe talk about kind of the potential offsets? Because I know that's another thing that the audience, I think, is following. And I think, obviously, one way to deal with that is the timeline of how far this bill will extend. Obviously, there's, we can talk about dynamic scoring, but can you maybe just talk about a little bit about what the offsets are without, I know you don't want to share the specific things you guys are thinking of, but just generally?
Do you want to talk baseline?
I would love for you guys
it feels like we're
talk
getting to that.
baseline.
Take it away, Kathryn.
I mean, I think there's a number of different paths that you can go down in this paying for exercise. There's first the decision of baseline. There's been a lot of talk about baseline. What baseline do you follow? Chairman Smith and Senator Crapo have both talked a lot about I don't want to say this wrong, current policy baseline, not a current law baseline. Current policy baseline means right now, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is the policy, is there. Current law means that it's expiring in 2025, so it doesn't exist in 2026. So therefore, it costs money. Depending on how that initial argument works out, depends on if we are paying or needing to come up with $4.6 trillion for just TCJA, and obviously there could be changes in there, it may cost less, more, whatever, but then we can look at non-TCJA policies, or do we have that kind of settled already and can turn and look at other policies? And that doesn't mean that we just made $4.6 trillion. It just means that now that's not hanging over our heads. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think, that's fair. I mean, I don't really have much to add to that. I mean, I think it depends on how you, the baseline question has to be resolved first. It's, there's a lot of back and forth. Again, while we're sitting up here, I'm sure there's going to be someone that's talking about this, in the Capitol. So who knows what the latest is. But yeah, it's one of the things that members are talking about, and Senator Crapo has talked publicly about this, that, using a current policy baseline, which is I don't want to get over my skis here because I'm not a budget expert, but roughly speaking, how the spending side of the ledger works is measured on a current policy baseline, and so he sort of makes the argument that tax should be treated the same way. And so then, to your question about pay-fors, I mean, I think once that is settled, then you get into the question of what are you trying to offset or not. I mean, I don't have anything to share today on what that number is, just because I think it's too early to tell, frankly. But it's something that's top of mind for members, and certainly will be a lot of back and forth on that.
Yeah, I mean, in TCJA, it was less of, I feel like, a pay for conversation and more of a, replacing one policy with another. So, we doubled the standard deduction and we lowered the rates and broadened the brackets. And in turn, we got rid of the personal exemption, and we changed AMT, and we did stuff to SALT. So they kind of ended up balancing each other out to an extent. And so it's another way of looking at it too. Obviously, in the pay for space, things like IRA are something that a lot of Republicans are talking about. And it's not across the board what I think, some people like IRA, some people like provisions in IRA, some people want to see it all go away. And so
We hope not.
I know, same here.
Did you work on that a lot? Was that hard? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, so like that I guess would be like, I feel like the most public that like pay for debate that's out there, but those decisions have yet to be made.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions, then we do want to open it up to audience Q&A, so have a few questions ready. I know this is a very vocal group. Maybe just a follow-up question to that, like how should stakeholders engage? I know that Chairman Smith had this process going for a while. I know Chairman, or Ranking Member Crapo, soon to be Chairman Crapo, has done a lot of kind of internal conversations, but can you talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement and how that process is playing out?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the need for education with members and the need for you all to be telling your stories and making your case to an extent with members of Congress. The tax teams were a huge part of that. The chairman has been meeting with all the different, groups across the House. We're doing staff level education sessions, all of that. But y'all are ultimately, the best advocates for your issue. Stories, the data, to the point that was made earlier, inviting folks out to the projects and having them see what has been done in their districts. That's, I feel like, the best way to make your case, which is why the chairman, sent the committee out to America to see everything firsthand. With that said, we have a lot of new members coming in who may not know what LIHTC is. They may think that LIHTC and Section 8 are the same thing. They're not. They're not even the same committee. And so making sure that you are getting in there and educating and making sure that folks know what these programs are that are important and what they've done in their areas is what you need to be doing. We also, with all the new members, there's still also a lot of new staff. There will be about 80-ish Republicans coming back that were here in TCJA. Obviously, we didn't touch housing policy in TCJA. We did in Smith-Wyden, so hopefully there's a little bit of a refresher there for folks. But people change constantly, so just because the member was there doesn't mean that the staff is aware of exactly what happened.
And there weren't even that many Republicans on Ways and Means that were during TCJA.
On the Republican side, there's 5 left that were here on committee in 2017. I think it's about 10 that were in Congress.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more than that during 2017. So
fewer and not as many staffers either, like you said.
Right. I mean,
new staffers.
Yeah, in 2017, I was sitting in the back of the room taking notes during these conversations, not, sitting up here having these conversations.
That's right.
So I think that's the most powerful thing you can do, because we know the policy. You don't need to sell it to us. You need to sell it to the folks that are casting their votes.
Kathryn and I are going to disagree on policy when it comes to taxes, but what she did say here today, I do agree with. Going out, excuse me, and educating the member staff of how this is affecting their district. Keep it short, keep it simple, give them some numbers, and I just think education is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. I totally agree with what they said. I mean, it's, you have the benefit for a lot of these projects if members can go see something, a physical structure, and not to oversimplify, but that helps. That is much different than talking about, how they expense certain thing, or whatever it may be. I mean, it's different because you can actually go see a physical project, and that's helpful.
That's the beauty of real estate, right? Like you can actually go see the project or development built. You can hear stories about the people who it impacted, how it changed their lives, and make sure you get in there and talk to all the folks on Finance Committee. I think directing it more at the Republicans in the House and Finance is probably where I would spend more of my time. But still come see me. We can get coffee or wine.
And I think Kathryn made a good point too. I mean, the wine is a good point too, of course.
There will be a lot of wine,
that's
sure.
very important.
That's what I'm here for.
Yes, but Kathryn made a good point too, is that, I mean, we have the luxury on the committee staff, we have the bandwidth. We don't work on every single tax issue. Thank God I don't have to deal with like international 1 second energy credits. I mean, I have a set number of issues, so I have the bandwidth to be able to kind of focus on things. But in a lot of our member offices, the staff do not have that luxury. So making sure that you're in touch with them, I think, is absolutely essential. And bringing staff to projects too, that's always a good thing.
Well, we're going to have some wine after this, so stick around. But I guess one thing, and what's so great about this panel is, obviously, if you all watch Fox and MSNBC, you get a very different look at the country, but obviously, I think we all get along very well. I think just maybe a fun one, and then I'll open it up to everyone. Kind of, can you tell me, and, as a former staffer, I think, you guys work long hours, modest pay, you get a lot of people pinging you. What's kind of the favorite part of your job, or least favorite? But would just be kind of, I think, curious for those folks that don't engage every day or kind of know the day in the life of a Hill staffer.
Do you want me to go? Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I love being on panels and talking to people. I like the meeting with people. I know, I love talking. You're like, shut up. Someone's gonna drag me off with a cane. No, but I think so there's so many cool aspects of the job, and it's definitely the social aspect is great, and being hearing, being kind of firsthand to the rumors, although, you find out more on Twitter a lot of times, right? But being able to work on and develop really good, important policy in tax that will have a significant impact on people and taxpayers, right? It's so interesting, and it's so meaningful. And I was at an accounting firm for 10 years, structuring real estate deals, which was really interesting in its own way, but this job is so much more meaningful. The fact that you can really impact people's lives and make good policy decisions that help the country.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is definitely a privilege. It's not lost on me. There are a lot of other people, not just in this town, but across the country, who would love to have our jobs. I mean, how lucky are we? And we get to interact with extraordinarily smart people. That is probably one of my favorite parts is I've met people I would have never otherwise interacted with. And the resources that we have to be able to, again, not just in DC and sort of in this world, but beyond that, being able to interact with folks who are experts in whatever the field may be, it's fascinating. And certainly the relationships you build and like Kim said, the social aspect of that is all great. So yeah, it's totally a privilege. I think the worst part, and it's an interesting part of it because it's just how the institution works. So it's really not even a complaint. It's very unpredictable. I mean, on the one hand, I thought to myself when I came here, I never wanted to do something where, every day was the same, where I was going to the same office and doing the same thing every single day. On that, I definitely checked that box because no 2 days have ever been the same. So I love that part. On the other hand, it can be difficult to plan, sometimes because you don't know. It's next week we're supposed to pass a CR, fund the government, and then close out this Congress. Maybe. I mean, Maybe. I mean, we can't sit here with, I mean, hopefully, but also maybe not. I mean, it might be Saturday, it might be Sunday, it might be who knows? So there's
Make
that
sure those
aspect.
tickets to Europe are refundable.
That's right. That's right. So you learn to plan around that, of course. But so it's the part that's fascinating because you never know what you're going to get. But also sometimes, it's like, yeah, around the holidays, it's difficult to book flights. So, yeah.
Well, let's see. I would consider myself probably like the rest of the people up here a true tax nerd. I'm pretty substantive in my tax, but it's actually meeting with stakeholders like yourself, which is I might know the tax code really well, but I don't know the issues necessarily that you guys are facing back in the districts. And so when you guys come to me to talk to me about the issues that you're facing and how maybe we can help through the tax code, that I just think is really rewarding to be able to use substantive tax knowledge and also trying to help a community.
Yeah, I would say, ditto on everything that's been said. Absolutely. But one thing that I think hasn't been said is, and I guess to the extent that no 2 days are the same, you're constantly learning. Like, I can think I know a provision of the code inside and out, and then all of a sudden some office has come with some new problem or new idea, and I'm like, hang on, is that how it works? Hang on, no, is that industry different than how that industry uses it? And it's just, you are constantly learning, and I don't think it's ever gonna be a time where you're gonna, know everything. You're not. Also, we change it a lot, so, that helps with
Job
it.
security.
But then I will say the social aspect of, you kind of come up a little bit in classes of staffers, and having those kind of like built-in friends, but also people that went through the exact same things that you did and know kind of where you're coming from and how you came to that decision and all those things, I think is so valuable because, once you get to this point, I think you're kind of stuck here. Federal tax policy doesn't really translate to state tax policy as much. And so you'll have these people around for a while and be able to go through that with them.
All right. I think there's some microphones set up on the side, so if you all have questions, and there's maybe a roaming microphone in the back too. It's tough to see with some of these lights, but
Oh, yeah.
I know people have questions.
Sunglasses would have been good.
Yeah. So bright.
All right, Matt, step on up.
Okay, I'm going to take this off. I'm going to work the room for a little bit. Well, I at least want to get an eye shot. Hi, guys, and thank you very much for...
wine too, Matt.
That's my first question. What wine do you like? And then we'll make a note of that. I will filibuster for a minute and just put a quick plug in for the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. You were, Kathryn, you were rattling through a bunch of the provisions that the Community Development Tax Credit Working Group was looking at. You didn't mention this one, but they were, correct?
Yes, they absolutely were.
Absolutely were. You were also
I was thinking of current law.
Current law,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Not prospective great new laws
No.
like neighborhood homes. And the other thing you mentioned also that Representative Kelly's the lead on opportunity zones. He's also the lead on Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, which has about 110 House co-sponsors. So, and I also think that's the kind of legislation, honestly, that's going to be very effective in your boss's district. You talked about his need to really support working families as his priority, and that's this credit is really designed at smaller starter homes or for owner-occupied rehabs. So I think it'll be a great tool in his district. So that's the commercial. The question is kind of like maybe a little procedural as well, so anyone that wants to tackle it can. I understand that is there a part of the reconciliation process where you first have to identify like a general category, like would housing have to have its own category, and then within that there's a funding set aside and we have to figure out, okay, well how much are we gonna use for low-income housing tax credit versus neighborhood homes and things like that. And the second, and you're already shaking your head no, and then my second kind of question too is dynamic scoring. Is that a thing? Because Neighborhood Homes Investment Act is going to create a lot more revenues than it would cost the government. So kind of where does all that fit in?
On the first part, and please all chime in, it's a reconciliation instruction. So the reconciliation bill that you pass, before you get into making new policy, going through the Byrd rule and all of that, it's first like a top line number. That's how much, you know, you can impact the debt in simple terms. But then also it has to name committees and what their personal instruction is. So it's not like an issue by issue instruction, but a committee by committee instruction. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
right. I did do budget for 2 years, technically.
But you have to meet the instruction, like Kathryn said, committee by committee. But if it was a, sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off, but
you're
just
right.
if you were trying to, if the budget committee does this, and if they send the finance committee and Ways and Means committee an instruction that says, you know, you have to, you can increase the deficit in 2017, you can increase the deficit by 1.5 trillion.
Yep.
The Finance Committee and Ways and Means Committee could have decided to spend all of that on one thing. You know, I mean, it was up to the committee. So the report back to budget could be allocated however they want to.
Yeah.
Housing would be great. Put it all on housing.
Yeah, 1.5 trillion. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
And to that point of like it needs to add up is, so I heard a story from TCJA on the Senate side that some score had come back. And it had come back like, I think it was when they were doing the brackets, but I could be wrong. It came back like 400 million higher than they had thought it was going to the last time we had it scored. And someone, I guess, said like, well, it's only $400 million. Like, does it really matter? It's like, no, it really matters. Like, it has to equal that amount. It cannot, there's no wiggle room.
And the second part was the dynamic scoring.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd love for that to be a part of it. And part of that is what you can sell, what the conference, what, you know, in this case, Republicans are willing to kind of accept when it comes to that cost conversation. You know, JCT, the Joint Committee on Tax, is who does all the scoring of this policy, what it is going to cost. But there's also other folks out there that do scoring. There's Penn Wharton, there's Tax Foundation, there's, you know, lots and lots of folks. And often they're somewhere around the same spot, but sometimes they're off. And so that's going to be on members when it comes to determining that instruction number, that 1.5 from TCJA number of, well, are we willing to go higher because we know it's going to bring in a bunch of dynamic scoring? If we can get JCT to kind of take in some of that into their scoring, that would be awesome. But they have their formula, and you know that's what we also ultimately have to go by in the instruction.
I think I figured it out. We should do 2 reconciliation bills. The first one just housing, and then the second for everything else. But all right. Any other questions out there? We got 5 more minutes. I know there's somebody out there with a question. Anyone? If not, I know that we got happy hour too. So, and Sarah's waving me on stage. So, thank you all for your participation. Thanks for coming. I know it's a busy time.